live from Kilifi, the KEMRI Wellcome Trust Research Facility Research Center in Kilifi. We are here today to celebrate the work that's done by Kenyan researchers in the field of medicine and understanding how our bodies cope and react to our own issues. So we'll be having guests throughout this morning just to understand what the work that they've been doing here. City, the proverb from Somalia.
Well, it doesn't have to do with housing, but a living mouth does. Is it the one I read, or is it?
It's the one. It's about the mouth,
A living mouth.
Yeah.
That's the one. Okay, let me continue. A living mouth does not give up talk.
A living mouth does not give up talk.
Yes.
Not at all, eh?
No, it doesn't.
Huh?
No, it doesn't.
As long as it's living mouth.
It's going to talk.
I said mouth, not mouse.
Yeah.
Yeah. That instrument we use for talking.
A living mouth does not give up talk.
Not living mouse.
Not living mouse. We could say other things about
A living mouth does not give up.
Fuck.
We have a guest with us. Dr. Sophie Uyoga is a research scientist here at the KEMRI Wellcome Trust Research Program, and she's been here for many years. Dr. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for welcoming us here.
Karibuni.
But welcome to the hot seats of the Situation Room. Asante sana for welcoming us. Doc, you've been here for many, many years. First, let's start with, what do you do at KEMRI Wellcome Trust Research Center?
So I am a research scientist here at the program. I mainly work on sickle cell disease, looking at how it presents in terms of the clinical aspect of it, but also looking at treatments that are laid out for these particular patients. And of interest to me is the link between sickle cell anemia and transfusion. That's the main area of my research focus at the moment.
How long have you been doing this?
For 18 years, since 2004, which is when I joined the program right from campus.
Take us through that journey. Okay, you can shorten it, not at you. You
I'll
know,
try
in the
to
first
shorten
month, so we came.
Day one.
So I actually visited the program in 2003, what was then the program when we were back at Kilifi, situated within Kilifi County Hospital. And I joined as an attaché student in the long holiday of my third year. And that was just 3 months. That was really an eye-opener into the world of research. And while I was actually doing my final exams in fourth year, the person who was supervising me then, Professor Francis Ndungu, actually called me and told me, Sophie, there's this opportunity, why don't you apply? So I applied for the job, came for the interview, didn't get the job that I wanted, but I was given an opportunity by Professor Thomas Williams, who was the person leading sickle cell research then. And since then, it's been a journey. So I got support to do my master's in immunology, and then moved then to do my PhD, which I completed in 2012. And after that, so my PhD was mainly on severe malaria. Then I changed focus slightly and settled down into the field of transfusion and sickle cell disease.
You know, what I'm interested in is understanding why it is, with your experience, your education, you decided to be a research scientist. Because I'm saying you could have been other things as well.
Yes. I actually wanted to be a pharmacist. That's what I wanted to do when I finished high school, but didn't make it into pharmacy. So those days we didn't have the opportunities that students have now of actually, knowing prior what other options are. So my uncle gave me an opportunity and took me to Nairobi University to change my options, and based on what I wanted to do, which was pharmacy, I was told the option is to do biochemistry. Then there was no BSc biochemistry, so I had to do Bachelor of Science.
Okay.
And, find my way through to biochemistry, which meant having good grades to be able to, make the top tier of students to be selected for biochemistry. And upon finishing, so you've done what you wanted to do, but then on finishing, the options were also very limited. It was either you go into sales as a medical rep, and I was like, that's not what I really want to do. So when I heard about KEMRI Kilifi, I was interested because I live in Mombasa. So I was like, I can at least spend my 3 months long holiday. And that opportunity of actually knowing what research is about is actually what built up my interest, and knowing that you can actually be part of the solution not always pointing out the problems, but, coming up with the solutions for our problems. Yeah.
And I think that's one of the fascinating things that we're able to see. I mean, now it's just jumping into that conversation. I think that is one of the fascinating things that we see. This thing that you've mentioned about KEMRI Kilifi being so close to Mombasa, and that this is the place where solutions then are being churned out on a daily basis for this heavy disease burden that we see in this part of the country and other parts of the country as well. Now, there's a link that has been made, with the studies that you're taking place now with sickle cell. Tell us about some of the things that you've been able to find over this disease that has burdened so many.
So back then, when I joined the program in 2004, there wasn't much data from the region. So, people, there was a lot of data from the US, the UK on immigrant populations, so blacks who've moved over. But from sub-Saharan Africa, there was very limited data. So where most of the research we've done has started from is just, first of all, describing the burden of the disease. Because people have to know. You can't say, okay, there's sickle cell disease, but then you're like, okay, where's the evidence? So we had to generate the evidence to show that this is a problem. And we've done that very well over the last 18 years. We've been able to determine that 0.8% of the population, the local population at the coast, are born with this disease. There's a lot of data also from Western Kenya. 0.8%.
0.8% of the local population.
Of the local
Those are very many people.
And this is then across the county, or is it
So
several counties?
we have pockets, of course, which brings about the history of malaria and the link between malaria and sickle cell disease. So Kilifi is definitely carrying the bulk of the burden along the coast, but we also have cases in Tana River, in Lamu, in Kwale, and also in Taita Taveta County. Yeah, so it's a problem along the coast, but I guess because we've been here and we've been looking at the problem, it looks a lot bigger in Kilifi because that's where our focus mainly is. But we have patients coming as far as
Let's take a step back, if you don't mind. What is sickle cell?
So sickle cell anemia is a genetic condition that you inherit, and the problem is that when you inherit one, so all your characteristics, you inherit them from your two parents, your mom and your dad give you copies of their genes. So if you inherit one copy of the bad gene, then you become a carrier. So you're not symptomatic. And the challenge is that the people who are not symptomatic really don't know that they carry the disease. The people who carry the two copies then become symptomatic, and they present with the various characteristics that we see them with. They struggle, they have painful crisis, they battle with anemia. Their growth isn't as normal like the other normal children. So definitely they don't look as normal. So you might be able to identify them and wonder, what's causing this? And also because it's inherited, then you can have several members of the family having the same thing. So the problem with sickle cell anemia is that it presents as abnormal red blood cells, so which means you reduce your oxygen carrying capacity. And with that, the cells are also very sticky, so they form sort of aggregates in your small blood vessels, and that's the source of the painful crisis that these patients mainly present with.
Can we look at this area where then it's more prevalent? Because then I think that fuels the research that is obviously done.
Yes.
So if you're looking at the tropics, the more humid areas, is there a connection between where people have grown up and where they live and sickle cell? Because if we look at other countries in the world, we're also seeing this play out where then there's a high prevalence of sickle cell.
Yes, so the highest burden is in India, Nigeria, DRC, Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, the countries just along the tropics. And historically, this is where also we had a lot of malaria. And so what happens is the people who inherit one copy of the gene, who are the ones you're calling the carriers, or the ones who have sickle cell trait, are protected against severe malaria. So the malaria parasite does not like, it actually lives and resides within the red cell. So the sickled cells are not the best environment for the malaria parasite to live in and multiply. So it protects you against severe malaria. So the ones who are protected, who are the ones who have sickle cell trait, and that means they survive the malaria seasons. So they're essentially meaning they actually have a better chance of living. So they're more in the population, and the more they are, the fact that you don't have screening programs for them to know that they're carrying the gene, they're not able to get what we'd call genetic counseling before marriage to be able to identify a partner who does not have sickle cell trait. So if the two partners have sickle cell trait, then there's a 25% chance that their child will have sickle cell disease. So that the history of malaria is what now makes it very prevalent along the coast and in Western Kenya. So that's the link.
So what work have you been doing on this?
So we have been, one of the platforms we have here, the program, is that we have a demographic surveillance system. We also have a surveillance system at the hospital. So we have detailed information on the causes of admission. And we also have a really good lab platform, and these three platforms are linked. So, yes. yes.
Now, surveillance.
Yes.
What is it?
Sounds like
big words. Sorry.
Yes, because we're talking about DCI.
trailing you.
So we're not thinking, okay, the DCI also work in this center.
So, yes, we have our own DCI in terms of data.
Yes.
So with surveillance, we have clinical surveillance, which is based at the ward. So we actively collect data in terms of at the pediatric admission ward. So here we have the children's ward, ward 1, and the high dependency unit with the children's ward. And even in the adult wards, we have a lot of work going there. So when patients present, the cause of admission is determined, the tests that are needed to be done are done, and all this data goes onto a database.
So that's surveillance.
That's clinical surveillance
Okay.
in trying to define the causes of admission. We have now the demographic surveillance that happens within our study catchment area that covers around 300,000 people within Kilifi County, and this is based on distance to the hospital. So they actually would mainly come for clinical services at Kilifi County Hospital. So we've mapped these homesteads. We have a team. I'm sure you've seen some vehicles living out. So those are people going to the team. They visit these homesteads. We have 3 census rounds a year. So we know we can monitor births, deaths, in migrations, out migrations, and hospital visits. And for the hospital visits, we have a lot of clinical and lab data. So that's the platform that most of our work is banked on.
So when you talk of homesteads, is it random or is it purposive? How do you determine?
It is purposive sampling. They, of course, with consent from the community, they have allowed us to map the area and to be able to identify them. So everyone living within the demographic surveillance system has a unique identifier. So I know where they live. I know the members of the homestead. When they come to hospital, I can link that this person came to hospital on this particular day. If it's a mother who's had a baby, when they go back and they find an infant in the homestead, they'll get the details of, so when was this child born? If deaths happen, we give the families time, to deal with the issue, and then we go back and do verbal autopsy to look at the causes of death. So there's a lot. It's a multifaceted approach with a huge team that supports this particular work. So most of the research is pegged on having that platform.
Lastly,
yes,
the criteria that you use for choosing these homesteads, what is it?
So you'd want to map out everyone. So unless someone has said they're not happy to be involved in the study, because you want the data that you present to be representative of the population in this particular area. So most of the homesteads are there. Unless someone declined to give consent, then they would not be part of the surveillance platform. Yes.
Okay, so from the, the research is intense. It's day after day of trying to. The causes are known, and I guess is research going on that's going to point to beyond management of symptoms from what you've been able to find so far here at KEMRI. I guess the question is there lights at the end of the tunnel beyond management of symptoms for sickle cell?
Yes, I believe there is light at the end of the tunnel. So one of the studies that we've done that has really given us good evidence is we recruited children between the ages of 3 months and 12 months. And this study started in around 2005 all the way to 2011. all the children born within our demographic surveillance area. We recruited them into the study. So we screened them for sickle cell and fed back the result. The ones that we tested, so we had about 16,000 children that we recruited over those years. We tested them. The ones that tested positive, we invited them to our clinic and told them, you have this condition, but we'd like you to come so that we can do a confirmatory test and explain to you about the disease and how it is managed and, step by step. The ones who came over to the clinic and have been working, we've been working with them through this journey. They're now actually teenagers. They're in high school, most of them. We've seen a better survival just through simple measures as knowing that your child has sickle cell disease. The parents also knowing. So you teach the caregiver to be able to identify the symptoms that require immediate hospital admission and what they can do and rush their children to hospital. But also just early and simple interventions that are actually there. So making sure they have all their vaccinations. If they need anti-malarial prophylaxis, they get it. If they need to put on penicillin, they're on penicillin. And the main thing, which is hydroxyurea, which is the drug that is currently in use, them being able to access that. That has given the better survival, because before it was known that they wouldn't even reach the age of 5. But now we are seeing a whole cohort of children. So we started the clinic in 2003, and up to now we have 800 regular clinic attendees. They come every 3 months, and that has really improved their survival. So beyond just giving them that, the education and training that the caregivers get has actually made a huge impact in how they're able to manage the disease.
Is there new research, or are there new findings that you've come about? Because we paid a visit to you yesterday at the lab and at the clinic. Is there new finding looking at this disease that KEMRI then has, through KEMRI, that you've come up and seen this is something new that would then be able to apply a new intervention to?
So we have a clinical trial that's ongoing. So initially, hydroxyurea has always been there in the market, but had never been tested within the African population to see whether it's actually safe to use it and whether it's feasible to actually administer it. So we've had a clinical trial that has been ongoing for the last 5 or 7 years, and we've actually been able to document and show that it is safe for use. We have 150 children who are on the clinical trial, and the data from the trial is very supportive of the use of hydroxyurea within our local setup. We are hoping to be able to do this work further and just look at the use of hydroxyurea at a community level. With research, you have a lot of detailed following and all that, but then now you want to look at it in a pragmatic setting where there are limited equipment and resources. Is it still, are we able to use it safely? So that's the type of research that we're moving on with. But we also have, yesterday there was an article online that we now have gene therapy has been done in Kenya, which I think is really, really impressive, that the fact that we actually these treatments that are there and available in the Western world are actually getting closer to us, and we might be able to easily access them without having to go out of the country. That is actually...
Can you talk to us a little bit about gene therapy? What is it?
So actually what has happened in Nairobi is it's a bone marrow transplant. So the main treatments that people are accessing, so hydroxyurea just enables you to live and be able to live your life. But if you want the actual treatment is a bone marrow transplant or gene therapy. Gene therapy is out of reach for us, but it's essentially being able to using biotechnology to modify the genes and add. So it's a gene that you've inherited, being able to edit your DNA and insert the right gene that you need to be able to produce good red blood cells. That's the ultimate treatment.
So by editing your DNA, what are you doing?
So you are essentially modifying and correcting the wrongs. That treatment is available. It's been done in the US. But for us, the easiest and reachable one is a bone marrow transplant. That's what most patients are getting done in India.
Right.
So if that technology has become available, and with the establishment of Kenya Blood Transfusion and Transplant Service, we know that these things will be regulated and they'll be reachable.
Is that
in
a
the near
treatment or
future.
is it a cure?
It's more of a cure. Not really a treatment, because it's one-off and
And
you're
that's
okay.
it.
That's it.
Okay,
So that's
let's take
what
a
you'd
break.
want to be able to access.
Let's take a break so we continue the conversation after this. Dr. Sophie Uyoga is a research scientist here at the KEMRI Wellcome Trust Research Program. She has been instrumental in all the research that's going through. We're talking about the breakthrough research in treating sickle cell anemia. Dr. Eunice Owino, who is from the Sickle Cell Huru Trust, says good morning to you.
Yes, good morning, Eunice.
Yeah, she is one person who is also a sickle cell warrior.
Yes.
And very, very active on creating awareness on matters of sickle cell. She says, good morning. Time for a break. We'll be back shortly. This is Kenya's biggest conversation, The Situation Room, live from Kilifi, the KEMRI Wellcome Trust Research Center.
This is The Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
Live today from the KEMRI Wellcome Trust Research Center in Kilifi. And this hour we're talking to a researcher. All day today we'll be talking to researchers from this particular facility. Our guest this morning is Dr. Sophie Uyoga. She's a research scientist here who is part of the breakthrough research in treating sickle cell anemia. Dr. You have very many fans. One of them is Irene Toya. Irene says, I'm a mother of a sickle son, and Sophie has been very instrumental in our lives.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Those are the type of stories that, just drive you when you see you've actually made an impact. Irene comes from Mombasa, and she's actually not even distant, she's actually a quite close relative who had a child with sickle cell disease, and I didn't know. And that's a challenge that most families are struggling with. People really don't talk about it. They're suffering in silence. So when I realized the boy has sickle cell, I'm like, but have you come to our clinic in Kilifi? And she's like, oh, you guys have a clinic. I'm like, yes, we actually have a clinic. Bring him over. We have a clinician who sees about 1,300 children a year.
Wow.
That's a clinical. So we're a big team of about 17 people. About half of the team is based at the clinic that we visited yesterday, and they see these children on a daily basis. So because we do research, we do a lot of reading. We look at the treatments, the managements, what works, what doesn't work, what are the options, and giving children tailor-made treatments depending on what they present with. And so in terms of being able to relate to the type of management, because there are a lot of doctors, but quite a number of them don't have they don't regularly see these patients, so it becomes a challenge for them to be actually able to manage these patients. So it's
in the case, for example, of Irene and very many other mothers, they don't know that their child is suffering from sickle cell anemia, do they?
So she knew, but it's just that
she did not know where to get help.
Yes, exactly. So you're in Mombasa, there isn't really a dedicated clinic. So the thing is, the doctors are there, but because it's not a dedicated clinic, and today you'll see this person, tomorrow you see another person, there's value in seeing the same person over and over and over, someone who knows the clinical history of this child, and they know where this child has come from, and what they've done over the years to get them where they are.
How do you diagnose? Sorry, guys.
Please, go ahead.
Final question.
No.
How do you diagnose sickle cell? How do you know that this person has sickle cell?
So it starts with, you look at the risk. So is there a family history? Family history is very important in determining whether potentially this child has sickle cell disease, how they present, if they have frequent severe anemia that requires. So severe anemia is when your HB goes below 6 and you actually require transfusion, if they always have painful crisis. So those are the clinical features that they use for diagnosis. But diagnosis now has to be confirmed by a lab test. So there are different techniques. There are point of care tests that you can use, which are they're getting cheaper by the day, but not really accessible in the local market. So we use a system called HB Electrophoresis, or City would understand what I'm talking about.
The what?
Baba, stick with something you understand.
Exculpatory.
Electricity, electrophoresis. Yes. So you're actually separating the hemoglobin to see how it behaves, and you're actually able to identify that this is sickle hemoglobin. So you have different hemoglobins. You have normal hemoglobin, which is hemoglobin A. You have fetal hemoglobin, which is what you're born with, and then as you grow as an infant, you lose it, and then there's the sickle hemoglobin. So the S is what you'd identify using various systems, molecular tests or for tests like electrophoresis. So for Kilifi County Hospital, we have been providing that facility over the years. Yeah.
Okay, something that you mentioned, which I think is probably critical of the work that KEMRI does here, is that the clinic is sticking with the patients.
Yes.
So you have a history of this particular patient, you know when they presented, you know if there's been any change, and then you know what you can recommend going. What are the benefits of then sticking with one patient and then being able to go through the life cycle of the disease with them?
So first of all, there is trust between the community and us, the scientists, because we've been there, we've walked that journey with them. So even when we want to do research, then it becomes easier because they understand why we need to do the research that we're doing. And they know that the research definitely directly benefits them because they're hoping that the care can be improved over time and policies will be changed and, new treatments would come along or better ways of managing the condition come along. The other benefit is that you're actually able to critically understand the disease and be able to see how it manifests and whether the treatments that they're using actually work, because you're following them over time, and which is actually important for you to be able to tell whether something works or doesn't work, an intervention is good for the population or not.
Diseases fall into the category of matters that human beings deal with that we refer to as problems. The thing about problems is that they raise questions. Now, what research seeks to do is to find ways of responding adequately and appropriately to those questions. And that's why you will understand that in many of the so-called developed countries, when you hear of a university or you hear of a university hospital, you have a hospital, the research component is given a lot of attention because it's that component that seeks to do what KEMRI Wellcome Trust is able to do. Hospitals keep records, but many hospitals in the country do not conduct research.
Yes.
They know the disease, but it's from the research, and when that research gets to the point where now it is actioned upon, there's what we call implementation science. Okay? That's when now you have a situation where you actually understand the 360 of that research. And the thing about the findings, they also induce and introduce new questions. So there's no time or day that research will come to an end. And the fact that Wellcome Trust is directly connected with the Kilifi County Referral Hospital, it is of an enormous help. Not just the hospital, but the community. Because I am thinking, and I'm looking. We have Moi Referral Hospital in Eldoret, and we have a university. We have a medical school. We have a medical training center. I look at Nairobi. If indeed the research component was given the attention that we are seeing here, I'm saying it isn't, because it actually isn't. Okay? Yes, no, it isn't. It isn't. A lot of the problems that we keep talking about perennially, we'll be talking about the problem, but alongside them, we'll be talking about the solutions. Now, there's a question attached to what I'm saying. How does the research you do and the people who work in that research, what do you do to ensure that you continuously get funding? Because in the absence of funding, you cannot do this work.
Continuously get... So funding is one of our major challenges. It really is a big challenge. For you to get funding, then you have to show relevance for your research topic or your area of research interest. And for you to show relevance, and that means you must have been active, very active. And for us, when we do research, our main thing is we generate policy briefs for government, but we also generate publications. So you really, people need to see that this work is being done and there's evidence. So if the evidence is there, then, and the evidence shows that there's a gap, then that makes it easier for you to get funding. But then again, funding is limited. Our sources of funding are limited. Several of us are going to the same pot. So, and we are heavily reliant on the developing countries to give us funding to sort out our problems. So the question is, what is our government doing to support the local scientists? I mean, I'm sure you've heard about KEMRI because of COVID. COVID put us in the limelight. We did a lot of work, and people appreciated the importance of research in COVID because the evidence was there, and the evidence is what drove the policy and the management of the pandemic. So I think the thing is, as much as we're saying there's limited funding, I think there is an opportunity for government to fund research.
There's no limited funding. The government currently, until the day that William Ruto tells us how he's going to cut that 300 billion shillings, is spending some 300 billion shillings that it should not be spending.
Exactly.
Okay?
Yeah, we'd like a bit of that 300.
Imagine.
True. I mean, again, of course, we look at things which, like the Abuja Declaration, which talks about, health receiving, at least a good chunk. Now, even within that, there is also the call for research to demand a good chunk of that. We're looking at many things. There could come a time where, and like you said, there's a light at the end of the tunnel. There could come a time where, look, we're done and dusted with sickle cell, and the footprint then reduces significantly. There's still other work that needs to be done. So what would be the encouragement? What would be the call to say, look, there's a disease burden that's still pretty heavy. There are many interventions that are still required. What does the spotlight need to be on, beyond what we're currently dealing with, to say that it's not, we're not asking for a today solution only, but looking into the future, what really needs to take the attention?
I think the first thing is the newborn screening programs. That needs to be rolled out in the areas that we know sickle cell is prevalent, because once you screen and they know, then it reduces the chances of them marrying someone who genetically would result in giving birth to a child with sickle cell disease. But the second thing is access, and it comes back to UHC, access to healthcare, because they are already there. You know how the population of Kilifi is. You're talking about someone who's struggling to afford a meal, and you're telling them to buy hydroxyurea, which can cost between 30 and 60 shillings capsule. And this is a lifelong medicine that they have to take. So that is a challenge. You're asking them to come to the clinic every 3 months. That comes at a cost. You have to pay consultation fees. You have to pay for the lab tests. Who's going to pay for that? And there's transport.
Because Kilifi is not just the town.
Exactly. Yeah. So if they can be able to get some buffer in terms of management of the condition through NHIF, I think that, for me, that would be perfect. Yeah.
Do they need to come to the clinic every 3 months?
Yes, because the prescription is for 3 months. You can't give them a prescription for a whole year. But also just to monitor them and just make sure that they're on the right track. But if they are stable, they can get a prescription and source for the drugs wherever they are. So they don't have to come. But then the next thing would be, because we are within the referral hospital, would we have these services accessible at the health centers closer to them, if that would be possible. Then that would reduce the issue of distance and them having to come all the way for management.
So that would require, KEMRI Welcome working with the county government to basically roll it out to that health center.
But the county government is already doing it. So you visited the pediatric clinic. We have an adult clinic that runs within Kilifi County Hospital, and as the children get to the age of 18 years, once they're through with high school, we transition them to the adult clinic. So Kilifi County Hospital is already doing it. They're doing a good job. They just
is it taken down to the health center facility?
No. It's at the Kilifi County Hospital. It hasn't been devolved.
How then we can sort out some of these other challenges, which is the transport, the time taken, and all these challenges. If I know that I have clinic every 3 months, and you also, Sophie, you know that I have clinic every 3 months, and this is where I come from, how possible is it for that service to come to me every 3 months?
It is possible. So we have mapped out, we know where our patients come from. The county has that information. So if they had the capacity, so in terms of human resource, the individuals have to be trained in terms of knowing how to manage these patients, and the drugs and have to be available at the health center, then it will be easier for that to be rolled out. It is very much possible. It's just a matter of availability of funds.
So it's scaling on the side of government to make sure that this can then be done.
Would you see it as an opportunity to then reawaken the use of community health workers here?
Definitely, yes.
Because then you have them. And I remember just looking at some things that have happened in other counties where community health workers then were supported with, the very basic kit that they needed. Would this be an avenue through which this could happen?
Definitely, yes. If they're trained, have a training package for community health workers, and they would be able to support, because they're the ones within the community, they know the people who are affected, they can be able to identify the affected families and give them the right information, and have a referral system now to the health centers, and be able to do the diagnosis with the point of care tests that can be done using just a finger prick sample. And once that is done, then you can now bring them the first visit. They can come to the main clinic, because also at the clinic what we've realized is the interaction within the parents. They've actually been able to form a support group for the caregivers, which is actually quite helpful, and they're able to encourage each other. So there's a bit of support that they can get from the referral hospital, but definitely a lot of it should be devolved down to the health centers and through the community health.
Do you have a system where within these communities you have peer groups? I'm thinking of the structures that were formed in the care and treatment of HIV, where you have people who actually have the disease getting together. Yes, the support group is useful, but what about people who actually have the disease?
So it's there, and they're actually more vocal. So Eunice, the one who, Owino is a sickle cell warrior.
Yes.
And we are getting more and more of them coming out and being able to interact, so that the caregivers and the parents can see that actually their children do have a future. And the children actually can see that you can survive with the disease and become whoever you want to be. It's not a death sentence. So that is there, and we are slowly, so within Kilifi, we have the caregivers support group, but we also have the adult sickle cell patients who have now formed their own group, and they're talking and they're having those discussions. We just need a bit more advocacy, and they need to be a bit more vocal, and they're getting support to be able to do that.
Because the stigma element that one encounters with sickle cell could be an even greater hindrance than everything else that we're talking about when it comes to actually receiving, accepting and moving with whatever healthcare process that are available.
Because the stigma comes in especially to the children, right?
Yes.
Because
even adults,
because you're not able to do much.
You're not able to do much, and you can imagine when you're getting to the age where you need to have a job. If your employer doesn't understand your condition and know that there are good days and bad days, someone will just think you're lazy.
Yeah.
Exactly. So it's not just for the children, even for the adults who are affected.
So in terms of awareness, how are you rolling out your awareness campaign for people to understand sickle cell? Everybody in the community.
We've been able to work with the patients and the caregivers, and we have been able to develop a 32-page comic book called Sickle Cell Heroes.
I have it here.
Yes, and we are telling the story of our patients, we are telling the story of our caregivers. It's not Sophie telling the story, but we've worked with them. Even through the development of the actual comic book, we had focus group discussions with the kids, and they told us what their issues are. You can imagine a child telling you that someone is telling them they're infectious, they can't play with them. Teacher not understanding that they can actually live beyond 18 years and be whatever they want to be. Them understanding that the management is the main thing that will see them through to adult life, and for them to be able to be who they want to be. So just giving hope, but also giving education and facts about the disease. And it's been rolled out through our schools engagement program, also using science clubs. We are giving it to our patients at the clinic. I sent a batch of the books to Eunice, and she distributed them in Homa Bay last week. So it's people need access to the right information, and we are hoping that by having it in both English and Swahili, we are able to give that information in a context that is acceptable and understandable by our community.
Sickle cell in Swahili is called selimundu. Ugonjwa wa selimundu.
Yes.
All right. So what's the story behind this comic?
So there are 4 stories. The first story is about Baba Pendo, talking about the role of the family and the stigma associated with the inheritance of the disease. So it the first story demystifies that and explains how you get to management and how you get determined, confirmatory testing. Second story is about Mwalimu Juma, and Lulu, talking about the education setup, the way they struggle with bullying, because they're weaklings, and other kids making fun of them. Their eyes are yellow because they're jaundiced. So just making the school environment a bit more habitable for the children and for the teachers to also understand what the disease is about, because these kids spend a lot of time with their teachers. The third story is a true story. Baraka the Dreamer. This is a sickle cell patient who also has a disability. Just talking about his dreams of being able, he finished high school, he's learned graphic design, and he's hoping that one day he'll be able to open his own, place and be able to run his business. The fourth story is about Davis, the success. So Davis is based in Malindi. He's finished his pupillage. He's actually practicing law now. So, there's hope.
Relatable
it's not all
stories.
Doom and gloom, yes.
Yeah.
So you have to give these children hope, and you have to give these families hope, and not just tell them, you're doomed. No.
There's a lot that
you can
be
live with it, yeah.
Sophie, congratulations.
Thank
well
you
done
very
for all the
much.
work that you're doing. You and your team, go and tell them. The whole of the country says asanteni sana.
Thank you so much.
It takes
We
a lot of
appreciate
dedication.
it. We appreciate it.
Dr. Sophie Uyoga is a research scientist here at the KEMRI Wellcome Trust Research Program. The motorbike is passing, so let me be louder a bit so you can hear me. Okay, we've been talking about the breakthrough research in treating sickle cell anemia. In the next hour, we talk to Dr. Simon Kariuki looking at epilepsy and mental health research